This lady bought this protege when it was a year and a half old from Hertz Rental Car for about $8,000. Got a new job where she's got to drive from Kentucky to Nashville every day. She wants to see, is it still going to be dependable, or should she look elsewhere? And I'm going to tell her the truth. All the pieces are still there. Mind you, the paint's fading away. That's typical with these. They didn't paint the clear coat right. It's all fading off. Realize she bought this thing for around $8 grand. 25,000 miles. She has 186,000 miles on it. She's certainly got her money's worth out of it so far. Is it going to be dependable in the future? We're going to find out yay or nay here. She lost the hubcap, so she put the good ones on one side. There's a little bash, doesn't make it run any different. There's no hubcaps on this side. Now that happened 10 years ago, so obviously it's had affect the running of the car. These were made as economy cars to go from here to there. As you can see under the hood, this is a 2-liter 4-cylinder. Unfortunately, it does have a timing belt, so you got to change the timing belts every once in a while. It's no race car, but it has 130 horsepower, a lot more than the original 68. And yes, it's an older car. It's a 2002. So it gets 28 miles a gallon on the highway. Not great gas mileage, but typical for that age for a 2-liter engine. Now, Mazda's always made pretty good engines. This one's still going pretty strong. Sounds perfectly fine. Got a tiny bit of valve clatter, but you're going to hear that on a car. This does have hydraulic lifters, and they're working good enough. But on this 02, it's the automatic transmission that's the weak point. You really want to road test them good if you have one of these. That's the weak point of these cars. They're automatic transmissions. And interestingly enough, Mazda's kind of the opposite of other car companies. Most car companies are getting worse over time. They're making their cars cheaper. Mazda, with their relationship with Toyota the last decade or two, they're actually making them somewhat better. The new Mazda automatic transmissions are infinitely superior to these older ones. The 4-speed automatic that comes with these things is notorious for being sluggish. They are relatively slow. But this is a subcompact economy car. It actually has quite a bit of room inside. You can see the back seat has a reasonable amount of space. As a compromise, yeah, this thing is never going to go 440,000 miles like the Honda I checked out the other day and still ran like a clock. Let's see what this thing does with 180,000 miles on it. We'll start it up. Starts right up. We'll roll the windows up so it's quiet. The windows still work. And when you put it in gear, it really doesn't shake much at all. She whines that the brakes have squeaked ever since she's owned it. Let's see what happens. Well, they didn't squeak then. Let's see if they squeak going forwards. No, but I heard a little squeak earlier. That's no big deal. That's just the brake pad material. You could put Akabono brake pads, it wouldn't make any noise at all. Now for a subcompact car, since it's small, relatively light, they do handle quite well. Before, Mazda had their zoom campaign, but it still is kind of zippy and fun to drive around it. The AC is still working fine, as are the brakes. They didn't squeak there either, so I wouldn't even care about that. The main thing we're checking out on this baby is that transmission. We're going to take it out on the road. First, we'll drive slow and see how it shifts. Just normal driving. That shifted nice and smooth. We're going up a hill. It should shift again. It shifted very smooth. This transmission is still in excellent shape. Now, like I said, they're not rocket burners. Here's what it accelerates from 0. Here we go. Makes a lot of noise. But even under high RPM, the transmission still shifts smoothly. This 4-speed automatic with overdrive actually is in excellent shape. It was generally earlier Mazdas that had a lot of problems with the Jatco transmissions. But this, we'll see what happens when we downshift. It downshifted fine for better acceleration. Now people whine that these things are slow. This isn't that slow. This isn't that different than a Toyota Corolla. A little bit slower than a Honda Civic, but bought this thing for $8 grand, 20-something thousand. She's put 160-something thousand on it. It still works perfectly fine. So I'm gonna get out the computer and see if she should hang on to it and use it for her big trips from Kentucky to Nashville every day for her new job. Now while I'm driving at highway speeds, I don't hear any bearings roaring, no odd noises. It goes straight, doesn't pull one way or the other. So we'll get the Nova scan tool out. It's now getting all the information from the VIN number, and we'll do a custom scan. Now while we're waiting for that, I'm not usually a fan of buying from a rental car company. She bought this from Hertz, but it only had 25,000 miles, and really, how much damage can somebody do the first 25,000 miles? As long as they don't smash into things, most cars are going to make it through that small amount of mileage without damage. But it's got 2 failed motors. modules. Let's see what they are. It's got a code for fuel pressure regulator control solenoid and intake manifold tuning valve control circuit open. Basically things you can ignore in this car as it aged. None of the systems work perfectly. The intake manifold tuning, maybe it's a little off sticking or something. Of course it will on an old car, but it runs fine. She gets normal gas mileage on it. As they age, those extra added things won't work perfectly all the time, but the car is still perfectly safe for using. Let's look at the live data. And here we go. Short-term fuel trim, it's 0. Minus 1.6. That's pretty good for an old car. 0 is perfect, right? The long-term fuel trim, 0.8. That's almost perfect too. This thing is in immaculate shape. In terms of efficiency, this thing is running fuel trim about the same as a brand new car, even though it has 186,000 miles on it. So in this case, looks can be deceiving. Yeah, the hubcaps are gone, paint's fading away, got a big old ding in the back, but reliability wise, she'd be nuts to get rid of this and buy an expensive, either new or overpriced used car. She's doing a long commute from Kentucky to Nashville and back. Highway mileage is equivalent to 10% city. This thing obviously has a lot of highway mileage on it, because I've seen these Mazdas with city mileage. 80, 100,000 miles of transmissions invariably crap out. This one still shifts like a dream. So don't be deceived by looks. This car still runs like a brand new car. Even though it's that old, 186,000 miles on it, it still runs good. It's a very dependable car. And these times of inflated prices, that's what you want. Don't go out and buy something else. This thing can go for years. Don't waste your money on an expensive car you don't need. I would not get rid of this car. It wouldn't make any sense. On a box car, yes. Not that much power, yes. Okay gas mileage, 26, 28 miles a gallon on the highway, not great, but if you get a car that say gets 35 miles a gallon and get rid of this, you're gonna pay a ton for that car. This thing's been paid for a long time ago. Got a lot of life left. You can't beat this 99 Mercury Grand Marquis. Now, a customer of mine just bought this thing from the original little old lady owner, and it's only got 55,000 miles on it. Look, it still looks as sharp as it did the day it was made. Now we check on the hood. It's got the big, old, dependable V8 engine. This particular one's a 4.6. Extremely strong engine. Big engine, you'd think it'd be a big gas hog, but these things really weren't. This thing gets about 17 in town, and it gets a whopping 28 on the highway because the way they're set up, the RPMs are pretty low when you're going 60 miles an hour. It's set up for cruising. You could drive these things all day long. And check the inside. Still in immaculate shape, and it's got semi-bucket seats. It's not the old bench seats like they had when I was a kid. No, the back's a little more couchy, but you can see, man, there's some serious legroom in this thing. And this one's unique because it's got the digital dash. It's still working perfectly fine, too. Of course, it has power, everything. Radio's got a lot of set buttons on it for something this old, 1999. It's pretty well set up. And look, the wood dash is still in good shape. Tons of headroom for you big people. Look, I still got a whole bunch of room before my head hits it. Check out the back seat. A lot of leg room in these things. Close the door. Nice solid door too. Hey, there's a lot of room inside this thing. It is not small. And of course the trunk, it is gigantic. It just goes and goes and goes. And check out the original wheels. 21 years old. Man, they're still shining. Look at that. It's amazing. Let's just say they don't make them like they used to. I see modern cars, they're 3 years old, and the alloy wheels are already pitting. They made things well back in the day. And if you do need to fix things, look at the working room. You never see that anymore. The AC is still blowing ice cold. The power steering's still working. The ABS is still working. They did start to put beauty covers on these things. I don't know why they bothered, but you know, even back in 99. Now with this overbuilt engine and a solid transmission, these things can basically run forever if you take care of them. But this one will start her up. Starts right up. It's only got 55,000 miles on it. Check it out. This baby isn't even broken in yet. See these things with 300,000 miles on it. But it's a 21-year-old car that's only got 55,000 miles on it. Even the rear defroster still works. And check out the digital readout. Not something you need a science degree to operate. Look, you want to check the things, you just push a button and it goes to the different ones. You don't have to think, oh, which button do I push? Then what do I do? Simple to use. As you can see here, I just turned the overdrive off. with the overdrive turned on, he's getting in the high 20s on the highway in this thing. And realize it's a classic rear-wheel drive car. They handle the best. People that are real serious about driving, they almost always want rear-wheel drive car. There's a reason race cars are rear-wheel drive. They just handle better. This thing is the classic rear-wheel drive. I've seen the differential still working fine, even with 300,000 miles on them. Pretty much, you take care of it with normal oil changes and regular maintenance, they can last forever. So let's start it up. Starts right up. Take it for a little spin. Now realize, they are kind of like land yachts. When you drive them, you more or less point and sail. They are a cushy ride, but you know, they're not tight handling. It's an old design. And with that big old V8 engine, I'll wait till these people are out of the way so I don't scare them. You punch it, it gets up and goes. And the ride, hey, it's smooth. Even though it's 21 years old. You hit bumps, all this weight absorbs most of the bumps. And it's not that sloppy when you're cornering. And strangely enough, my customer is a teenager. This is his first car. So, you know, it goes from the old generation to the young generation. And there's a lot of people buying these things now. A lot of younger guys are souping them up. Some of them turn them into low riders. It's a giant platform. You can do whatever you want with it. Now, odds are you're not going to find too many 21-year-old ones that only have 55,000 miles on it from the original owner. But there are a lot of elderly people that buy these, the Crown Vics. A lot of them don't drive that much anymore. Luckily, had good control. The car's not full of dings. I get quite a few of them come over here that they're still running good, but man, they got a lot of bashes in them from running into stuff in parking lots. But this one's whistle clean. Hard finding one with that kind of low mileage. But even if it had 100,000 miles on it, I've seen these things go over 300,000 miles. You just pay less money, that's all. But if you find a cherry one like this, somebody's asking $5 grand, odds are it's going to sell for $5 grand. Don't try to argue them down real far and then the next guy comes in with $5 grand and buys it from under you. So really, if you're looking for a family cruiser, or you're like my customer, a teenager just likes old big American cars, you really can't go wrong with one of these, especially with low mileage like this. What are you going to get for $5,000 these days, you know? 1/5 of a car, maybe a new one? You get a big old solid built one. Like I said, look at those wheels. The wheels still are in excellent shape. They used to make them a lot better than they do today, I'll tell you. 91 Honda Prelude, sports car. They made them for quite some time. You look at the early ones, man, they were ugly. This, much better looking. And then if you ask me, as they went on, they became kind of nondescript. In the end, they were pretty much just Honda Accords rebadged, similar body style. But when they were making these, they were still a sporty car. Now, of course, the problem with this car is it's a northern car. So, this is one reason you don't do Bondo on a car. It doesn't hold up. Now, as the owner knows, in England they make kits where you can get a whole sections, cut them off, weld them on, and repaint them. That's the only way to really fix it. Bondo, you gotta cut it off, put new metal in. But they make kits for them, the English especially. They're nuts about sports cars, and they got a lot of kits and stuff you can buy relatively cheaply. Now, he bought it 6 years ago for $3,600 before coronavirus. There's a lot of stuff around. It had 100-something thousand miles on it, but it's a Honda, and they can last a long time. Like I said, the main problem with this is it's a northern car, and they will rust. If this was a Texas car, it'd be another story. But it's a northern car, so you got to live with what you got. Real selling points of these, of course, were the engines and transmission. As you can see, all the real ones come with a manual transmission. This one's a 5-speed. And we look under the hood, you see the main reason people buy them. They're just kind of whining because this is a non-VTEC engine. He'd rather have the VTEC one, but they're really hard to find. Inline 4, it's a very good engine, but of course it's not the VTEC, so it doesn't have the oomph that the VTEC did. Honda really was the first manufacturer to super mass produce VTEC systems to get more power. They got a lot of power out of smaller engines, but at the same time they were extremely dependable. Now, if you want to go into the history of it, one of these Italian companies were the first ones to make it, but of course they would blow up all the time. This thing's a 91. It still runs pretty good. You know? You're not going to find it with an Italian car. The Japanese pretty much perfected it. So it's got 151,000 miles on it. Now, but, you know, it still runs pretty good. Now, the owner admitted it burns a small amount of oil, maybe a quart every 3,000-4,000 miles, and of course, if you get on it and drive like a maniac, it will burn more oil. We had a customer back in Lewiston, New York when I was a kid in the 60s. He had an SS Chevy and it ran okay. But when he really went on it, he'd burn 2 or 3 quarts of oil in a night when he was really getting on it. But if he drove it normally, I'd only go through a quart every 800-900 miles. But you push an engine and it's going to burn a little bit of oil. As you can see, this is when, as far as I'm concerned, they started to ruin cars in the United States because they got all the plastic bumper stuff. You know, I liked them when they had real bumpers. EPA mandated crash and stuff, so I liked them better when they had chrome bumpers on them. But that's the way they made these things. Now, they never made convertibles with these things, but the sunroof comes up pretty far up. You can see it's kind of rusting away. Like I say, this is a northern car. Now we'll start it up, make sure it's in neutral, and away we go. And being an older Honda with a lot of miles, there's some ticking going on. That's totally normal for these. Now, you can adjust the valves. They need to be adjusted every so often. But even if you just adjust them, you're still going to hear noise because it's just worn, and you're going to hear a little bit of lift noise on it. That's totally normal for one of these things. And you can see it had the radiator replaced. Hey, they replaced it with a metal one. That's a smart move, right? That's the one advantage of Hondas. Even though they didn't sell all that many Preludes, so many parts are interchangeable with the Accords. They sold millions of them. The big advantage of this is it may be old, but it's fuel injected. Yeah, it's got a distributor. It's not a distributorless system. It's got an old-fashioned distributor, so it's easier to work on, but it's fuel injected. I'll tell you one thing about the Preludes is, unless you like spending half your life messing with carburetors, never, ever buy one of those Honda Preludes that's got dual carburetors on them, because those dual Cayennes are absolutely hellacious things to work on, to keep in tune. The best thing they ever did to the Prelude was put fuel injection. Now, I'm gonna go back way in history when Honda was making those N600s and N800s, all right, they once made a little bitty 4-cylinder engine, and that baby had 4 Cayenne carburetors on it. And to boot that off, each wheel had a chain drive sealed system that made it go. They were low production sports cars. These are high production sports cars. They made enough of these, not like the little earlier ones where they were pretty much very limited production. They wanted to make little bitty sports cars. They were kind of making them look like English sports cars. This was their own design. They handle well. They evolved through a bunch of different generations. Like I say, the last generations, they're kind of just like a squashed down Honda Accord. To me, they kind of ruined the car, just like Ford with a Thunderbird. They started out as sports cars, then they ended up in these big, ugly, just didn't have any power, ugly looking. You know, the early ones, nice sports cars. And this being kind of in the middle, it's still a sports car. The later ones, I'm not such a big fan of. That's probably one of the reasons they don't make them anymore. They made them so ugly that guys who wanted sports cars are like, this doesn't look like a sports car. It's just a Honda Accord. But at the same time, if you do buy a late model one, let me warn you something. The late model ones are hard to get parts for, because even though they're kind of like Honda Accord, a lot of parts are different. I had a guy in Houston bought one. I couldn't get an air conditioning compressor for it because it was different than the Accord. I could get the Accord ones like that. So with his, he kept buying rebuilt ones. I said, don't buy rebuilt air conditioning compressors. They're garbage, right? But we couldn't find a new one because the Prelude was different than the Accords. So realize there are parts on the later model ones. You're gonna have a hard time getting parts for them. I wouldn't go out and pay a bunch of money for one, because you're gonna find out you're gonna have an endless money pits looking for parts, and sometimes find out I can't even get new parts. I gotta get either junkyard parts or reman parts. It's not a good position to be in. Now as we look inside, this is why I tell people, cloth seats, hey, these are 91s. They're still in pretty good shape. Yeah, there's a tear here from getting in, they all do that, but if these had been leather seats, forget it. They'd be all tattered and torn to shreds. As we go inside, even though they're old, these are comfy seats for zooming around. And even though it's old, it's got digital dash. Of course, digital was in those days, right? Some of it's digital, some of it isn't. He's changed the stereo. The Honda stuff stinks. He put a Kenwood in, or one of the previous owners did. Nice size steering wheel with a good grip. And yes, it does have power windows. It's got 158,768 miles on it. And it's a Honda, so it may be 91, but the AC still works. Yes, it does. So, of course, aren't parts have been changed. You can see it's got a remanufactured alternator on it. Down there, still looks like it's got the original air conditioning compressor too. These things are well made. If you saw that video I made years ago where I bought one of those original Hondas that they brought in, those little cars with the 595cc motorcycle engine, they've gone a long way from that. And if anybody ever wants to know what happened to that, well, guess what? I gave up because you can't get parts for those old ones. I couldn't get cylinder heads. The only thing I could get was a head gasket. That was it. I couldn't get a carburetor. It didn't have a brake system. I couldn't get a brake master cylinder. You can't get parts for those old N series. You just can't get parts for them. Now I know a lot of guys like souping them up. They'll put 750 Honda motorcycle engines and stuff in them, and it's totally doable. But I wanted to keep it stock, and considering that the body was all rotted away and the engine was locked up, the guy said it wasn't, but it was, I just sold it on to a guy for what I paid for it, 500 bucks. Then later he sold it on to somebody else, and I don't know what happened since then. But if you're ever going to mess with one of those early ones, get one that isn't rotten, and probably throw a Honda motorcycle engine in it, a modern engine, not the engine that it came with, because you can't get parts. They were underpowered. Better with a modern Honda motorcycle engine. So let's take it for a spin. Now we're going down the road and for a little sports car. Hey, it still rides pretty good. Honda's always made cars for driving, and they have better suspension systems than the Toyotas do, so they're a lot more fun to drive around. You take comparable cars to these back in the days, you get in the little Toyota sports cars, those rear-wheel drive ones they make, they don't handle like this thing. Now, as you can see, it may be an old car, but check it out. It doesn't shake at all. Honda knows how to make engines. No shaking at all, as old as it is. Now we're going to see what this thing can do. It's a fun little car to drive. It's up and goes. Too bad it doesn't have a VTEC though. It'll get up and go even faster. An oldie, but a goodie. This thing still runs quite well. 91, that's an old car, right? But it's a Honda. Yeah, they don't make Preludes anymore. They're kind of out of the sports car business, other than the Honda Civic Type R, which is a little bitty race car, right? The Preludes, they made them for a long time. There's a bunch of them out there. You don't want to get rusted out ones. And if you're a Zoom Zoom fan, you'll be happier with the VTEC engine. But this non-VTEC one, it's still going strong. Fun to drive around. And you don't have to spend that much money on it if you can find one that isn't rotting away. But like I say, if you find one that's all rotten away, walk away, because if it's rusted and it's coming apart, all that stuff starts rusting, you don't want to buy something like this. Now this one, hey, it's more or less superficial. The body's okay underneath. It's just all these fender flares and stuff going. You can cut them out. The rest of it's still pretty solid. Even though it's lived in Jersey forever, this thing's old. Even in Jersey, it doesn't need any kind of inspections now. So you don't have to deal with the crooks taking your money, telling you, well, you gotta spend 1,200 bucks if you want your car to get registered. Nah, you don't have to worry about it. It's under the Old Car Act, so you can drive it and do whatever you want to it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.